What's up, everyone, and welcome to Level 7. It is time for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast, where we will be reviewing Avatar: The Last Airbender. We've been away for a week, but that doesn't mean there hasn't been great content on the Agents of Fandom podcast feed for you, as the Comic Corner is now available on the Agents of Fandom podcast feed as well. Joining me today, there's no Adam. He's in his Dune Part 2 era. Gone for the second time already. You can find his review up on agentsofandom.com, and honestly, some great Dune coverage up on the Agents of Fandom socials right now, at Agents Fandom on Twitter and TikTok, Agents of Fandom everywhere else, because our own Layla and Millie, they got to go to the UK premiere. Layla was at the red carpet meeting all the stars, and so you can find that footage up on the YouTube page. Buried the lead a little bit, but joining me today, first up, we got three amazing guests. First up is Damon Gray, host of the Comic Corner. How you doing, Damon?
I'm doing great. I am very excited to talk about this show. I can't say I've been biting my tongue because I've just been writing like a maniac on the website, but I'm ready to talk about it with words through my mouth. It's gonna be great.
Writing about it like crazy on the right website, becoming basically a Avatar: The Last Airbender influencer on social media. You got the name change, you got the picture change, you got viral tweets going. Joining us as well, speaking of the Agents of Fandom socials, we got our co-owner, one of our fearless leaders, our I don't actually know your exact title, social media director, whatever it is. He's the very best in the industry and a major Avatar: The Last Airbender fan. Ryan Cortero, how you doing, Ryan?
I am doing very well. I have not gone to... I mean, Damon has taken great control of everything because, like, he's the expert. So I'm just, like, enjoying it as a reader at this point. Like, you know what? I'm going to get the full-on lesson myself because, like, he has been pitching all the Avatar books to me, and I still haven't gone on it yet, but I will. Yes. So, anyways, but I'm excited to talk about this show. I've watched it twice now, from beginning to end. So, a lot of thoughts.
I'm getting the same types of text messages from Damon, where it's like once a week he gets me, this is your reminder to read the Kyoshi novels. This is your reminder to read the Kyoshi novels. And you can find who is Avatar Kyoshi up on agentsofandom.com from Damon as well. Joining us once again, second time on the podcast. You may recognize her from our Percy Jackson episodes, host of the Seaweed Brain Podcast, Erica Ito. How you doing, Erica?
I am good. I too think everybody here should read the Kyoshi novels.
Love it. We got some. I brought in the big guns today. I brought in the big Avatar: The Last Airbender fans. So once we actually get going, I don't know if I'm going to be doing all that much talking. I might just pass it up to the experts here. So I'll throw it to you here first, Erica, because you have such a fun story with this, and so I want to throw it to you. But the Seaweed Brain Podcast, you started it. It's one of the best Percy Jackson pods out there. But Avatar: The Last Airbender was almost took over before the Seaweed Brain Podcast even began.
I love that I somehow managed to tell you that in the like 4 conversations we've ever had in our life, that like that is like one of the few things that you know about the lore of our show. It's true. Me and my co-host Carter Nakamoto, we wanted to make a podcast about a piece of media that was really, really important to us, and we were tossed up between Percy Jackson and Avatar. But we ultimately went with Percy Jackson. I think kind of the reason behind that decision making was that Avatar is like perfect. Like truly, like Atla as an animated series, like there's nothing I could say about it. Like we were like, we're just gonna like sit there and say it's perfect for every episode. But Percy Jackson, we felt like there was more to discuss, so we went with Percy Jackson. But yeah, Avatar, it means more to me than any other franchise. I'm definitely a big nerd for it.
On that note, let's start talking about this new live action adaptation here on Netflix. Before we get going, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff, especially if you're watching us on YouTube. If you are, you're getting an extra nice show today as we're all wearing our Avatar: The Last Airbender theme merch. Mine is the only one that's probably not quite official. It's the Agents of Fandom with the Avatar stuff on there, but that'll be launching soon. By the way, new Agents of Fandom merch coming soon, so stay tuned to the socials for that. But Damon, I want to start with you because as your Twitter account says, you are in your Avatar era. You're in your Avatar state, I believe it says. What did you think of the show?
So I wrote the review for it over on the Agents of Fandom website, and it was a fun first watch, just going through 8 straight hours nonstop, episode after episode after episode. The main thing, the poetic thing I can come up with as my thoughts for it, where it is uniquely its own, yet is still distinctly Avatar. It is very much its own thing. 100%. They take a lot of liberties in saying this is an adaptation. This is not a one for one. And I sat through it and I liked it. I think the best way I can say it is my infamous 3-word reviews is I liked it. It's it's not without its problems, and it is, not as awful as I've seen some people throw out on there, right? I think it is a decent adaptation. It gets some qualms with some characters. It has some qualms with the story itself trying to blend a little too much into short time. But overall, I think it still has a heartbeat. It still keeps its soul. And if it does get a season 2, which I'm expecting it will at this point with the numbers that it's getting on Netflix and number 1 in worldwide, which is crazy. If it does get a season 2, it'll be significantly better than season 1.
I couldn't agree more, and that's a lot like as great as season 1 of the animated Avatar: The Last Airbender show is, it really does just get better after the first season there as well. You brought to me like a great description, but just as I was finishing up the show, where you said the show itself is like the Avatar. It's a reincarnation. It keeps the soul, but it's an entirely new, different being, and I thought that was a really good description as well. Ryan, what did you think of the adaptation? You said you've gone through it twice now. Did you enjoy it? Which did you enjoy more, first or second watch?
Honestly, I'm trying to. So the first watch, it's more like I'm analyzing this. I'm kind of having that one-to-one comparison a little bit, even though I'm trying not to. But as much as I've watched the animated series, I'm like I can't help but compare it. So the first one was a little bit more of a comparative analysis, but then the second watch, I'm like, okay, I know what this show is now. So the second watch kind of made it more enjoyable, a lot more of appreciating some of the things that maybe I didn't enjoy on the first watch, just because I know something will be brought up later on that I thought was missing earlier on. So stuff like that, I'm like, you know what? I think from first watch, it was maybe a 7 out of 10. And then after the second watch, probably bumped up to a 7.5, maybe 8, just because I can see again, the first season is not the best out of the 3 from the animated series, but the building blocks that they set up here are really good, and I hope that for the next season, they do continue some of the trends, with some of the changes that they're doing, but also add in a bit more episodes. Just because the 8-episode runtime really hinders a lot of what made the original series better, in terms of letting stories breathe, and in terms of letting characters kind of develop over time, instead of this is them from the onset and that's kind of how they are for the rest of the season. I think having that space for the characters, for the stories, will work a lot better in season 2 if they give them more episode count.
And we'll dive into that more when we get into the specific characterization of each of the main players in Avatar: The Last Airbender. But I think specifically for Sokka and for Katara, they were sidelined for a decent portion of it, whereas we could have liked to see a little bit more of that growth, and some more episodes in season 2 would allow for that to happen. Erica, what were your thoughts on the season as a whole?
Okay, so my general thought is why I'm not entirely sure still what and I've stayed away from a lot of critical analysis of the show because I just finished it last night and I wanted to watch it myself first. But I do wonder what overall the intention is and what the goal is, because I don't think I'm personally somebody who subscribes to the idea that a live action adaptation is the final, truest, ultimate form of anything animated. And having just come off of the Percy Jackson adaptation, Percy Jackson, I think I talked about this a lot the last time I was here. there was no like worthy visual adaptation of the Percy Jackson books. But adapting an animated show is obviously very different from adapting a book series. Like we already have the visuals, like it is already formatted for television in a very specific medium, which I think just it poses a very interesting and tricky adaptation issue, which I don't know that I have ever seen anything adapted from animation that I really thought was done better live action, that like really needed to be done live action. I don't necessarily know that this needed to happen for anyone, but I think that I had fun watching it, and that like I don't know how much it generally contributed to the fandom or to the canon of Avatar, which is like really deep and like very thought out, like not quite to the extent of Star Wars, but I think a lot more than most people realize with all of the additional books. Again, I had a good time watching it, but I think that in order to adapt it, it probably actually could have taken, from my perspective, it could have made more choices. Like I think it was a little bit too much straddling the line between one-to-one and choices, whereas like if it went further into like we have an opinion, we have a specific idea that we want to add to the story that hasn't already been said, that would have made me engage with it more. But I think that's really hard because I personally think that it's perfect in its original form, and how you adapt something that's perfect is a question I don't have an answer to. So yes, overall, why? But sure.
That was actually ending with a why, but sure is so similar to Damon's. I liked it with just like the final conclusion of it. I love it so much.
Sure.
It's such a unique situation because one, Avatar: The Last Airbender movie, one of the worst things you will ever see. Avatar: The Last Airbender animated TV show, one of the very best animated shows that exists. And then you see, and just right now is the time of so many either remakes or adaptations, specifically from animation to live action. And we see Netflix just recently sets this didn't work with Cowboy Bebop, and this is the new standard because that was basically perfect with One Piece. And I think this one does fall somewhere in the middle, closer to the One Piece side than the Cowboy Bebop side. But when on its own, just kind of like individually, I think this is a very fun TV show. And then comparing it to something like you said, Erica, that's perfect. It's a harsher scale. It's a harsher scale, especially when the fandom is coming off the PTSD of the last time this tried to get made into live action. Let's talk about some of those qualms. We'll end this with positivity, and we'll end this with all the things we like. But let's start diving into some of the qualms. Damon, you wrote a great article about all the not maybe all of, but all the biggest changes on between the live action and the animated series up on agentsfandom.com. Among those changes, which are the ones that are like, that didn't do it for me?
There is one in particular. That to me is absolutely downright inexcusable. Book 1 is called Book 1 Water. It's the book where Aang learns how to waterbend. And throughout all 8 episodes, the only time I ever see this boy waterbend is when he merges with the ocean spirit. That is it. And that doesn't count. That is practically cheating. So I don't understand why they didn't show Aang learning how to waterbend with Katara. You see sequences with Katara learning how to waterbend, and then Aang pops up and tries to give her more of a spiritual advice and, tutorship. But why not at the same time have him, just for a few sequences, learn it too? For me, that's all I need, because if this does get a season 2, we all assume that if this gets season 2, the first scene will be him waterbending, be like, after a whole year of training, we finally did it. And then you just get it all off camera. I don't know why they did that. There's one line in there. I've watched the show 3 times at this point. And it was because like anytime I write something, I kind of have it on in the back and it kind of like clicks something. And I just heard it again today. And he said, I don't really want to learn because I was Monkey Yatso's thing. Like, he was my teacher and I'm scared to learn without my teacher. And I'm like, I understand, but yet we still have to get to this point, and we never did. That was an inexcusable one for me.
I think one way that it could be, and it's like you said, it's still the biggest inexcusable part is like, why not just include a little bit? show him doing it alongside Cortero just a little bit. I think one of the things that could benefit the off-camera side of it is, to me, in terms of all the bending looked incredible, and the water bending was just fine. And the water bending is by far the most difficult to do, like, I think from a visual effects standpoint. And so maybe with a bigger budget on season 2 and some more time figuring that out, they're going to be a little bit more in their bag with water bending. But still, show us a little, it's book 1, water. Show us him learning to water bend. What about you, Ryan? What were some of the, you said first watch was a 7, maybe brought it up to 7.5, 8. What was keeping it from being higher to 9 or 10?
Definitely the Amashu section of the show is like where things like, what is going on? Because episode 1 is like, okay, pretty much 1-to-1, the pilot and like the early beginnings of the series. And then episode 2, the stuff with the Kyoshi Warriors, the changes there with what they do with Kyoshi and everything there, that's really great. So then you come off that to episode 3 and 4 where they blend Amashu, Jet, the Mechanist, Teo, the Secret Tunnel, like everything that they could into that one, into those 2 episodes. And episode 3, I'm like, we know this is Amashu. We're gonna get King Boomy here. As I'm watching through the episode, I'm like, okay, they keep, we're dealing with all the Mechanist stuff. We're dealing with Jet. I'm like, where's King Boomy? I'm like, is he just gonna be like a very little thing at the end, and then at the very end, they get captured, and then you're like, oh, okay. Next episode, we're going to see King Boomy. And then when we see King Boomy, I'm thinking, all right, we're going to have this little ploy, or like this, like what the show did, where, Aang doesn't know that that's actually Boomy. They have like this little trial thing just to see like if Aang is picking up that it is Boomy. But then no, he just says it right from the jump, like, yeah, it's me. I'm your friend. And then it's the characterization of Boomy that's really like, I get to an extent where like, yeah, your best friend, he was supposed to save the world and then he disappeared. And so you are this old man who's angry at him, like, because your friend left and he could have done something about it. So I get that, but I don't know. I'm not 100% on like the characterization of him. He's still a little funny and quirky, but that it was just the King Boomy of it all, and then just all the stuff that they included in episode 3 and 4 that just felt a little off to me.
I'm with you with Boomy. I feel like I was kind of, it makes sense. It's like you said, it makes sense he'd be a little more jaded, right? It's been a war and for 100 years, and he's been alive for all of it. It does make sense he'd be a little jaded. But at the same time, I was kind of waiting for that second shoe to drop with him of like, hey, where's the jokes that are going to come out? He's above all supposed to be chill. He's a goofball and he's doing silly things, but internally he's chill and he's going to wait for his opportune moments all the time. And this aspect of him kind of was counterintuitive to that a little bit for me. Like, as we see more Boomy in the future with the way he handles various war tactics of just like letting himself get captured and things like that, I didn't really necessarily see that in him in this character specifically. Erica, what about you? What were some of your biggest qualms? And I'm interested in your thoughts on Amashu specifically too, because you brought up they either could have taken some bigger changes or been closer to the 1-to-1, and this is one of those that they just blended it all, and I'm not sure what worked and what didn't.
I wasn't as bothered by the Omashu sequence as I know a lot of people were. And I like, because that, I mean, it is very like they smush so many things together. I felt that overall, like the condensation of events made sense to me. Like, I think this is like more or less how you might chop things up and smush them together. But a friend of mine pointed out, and I haven't done the math on this, so someone can fact check me, but I think that the live action show technically has more minutes of runtime than the animated season 1. Yeah. So that leaves some things to question. Like, obviously, logistically, it's easier to have things take place in one setting. You don't have to build as many sets. You don't have to do as much post-production animation and all that stuff. So yeah, I wasn't super bothered. I was just like, as long as we get Secret Tunnel, that's all that matters to me. Like, that is one thing. Like, if they had cut Secret Tunnel, that would have been my like hill I died on. Like, absolutely, this adaptation is canceled. So I'm glad that they had that in there. But as far as like swings, like I told myself, knowing how sacred Avatar: The Last Airbender is to me personally, I was like, the only way I'm going to be able to watch the show and enjoy it is if I just like let go, like just have a fun time, like let myself watch it, let myself enjoy like all of the work that so many specifically like Asian American creators put into this show, because that I think is, we can talk about that more later, but I think that's ultimately like what this is valuable for. But I was like, I'm gonna have to let go. And so as I was letting go and just letting the plot kind of take me wherever, drifting along with the plot sequences, I was like, what? Like the thing I would have appreciated a bigger swing on and like more letting go on was the costumes and the hair and the makeup. And I don't feel as though like there is one person to like cite for this, because it's, you know, this is a collaborative process, TV making. There's a lot of people making a lot of decisions. I think we could have diverted a little bit more from the like almost one-to-one recreation of the animated costumes, because I think it's so hard for it not to feel like cosplay when we are so used to like years and years of watching people cosplay. It literally, to me, it was just like, it looks like I'm at Comic-Con right now. And like, I was not vibing with the sideburns. I am so sorry. The sideburns, the mutton chops, they, while they are accurate to the show, they did not look realistic even a little bit to me. The like the really thick beards, like it was just a little bit pulling me out of the scenes when as opposed to, you know, just like drawing me in. And that was really hard to see because I felt like the set design was so good. Like particularly everything in like Zuko's bedroom and like everything about, I think like the design of like the Northern Water Tribe like was so beautiful and like visually like arresting, and I love to see it. And then I was like, why? What is going on with this fake beard right now? Like we didn't need it. Was the beard adding anything to the story? No, cut the beard, save some money, save some time, and like have a little bit more confidence in the freedom to play around. I think it goes back to the like you could have like made a few bigger swings, but again, it's so difficult because we have such a strong relationship to the original. I understand the desire to like recreate it.
It's so refreshing to talk about this with three people who are not only big fans but are rational, logical thinkers and not just like so extreme about every situation. Damon and I were actually talking about that a bit off camera about some of the beards and things like that, of like whether it be Boomy or whether it be pardon me, I forgot the Northern Water Tribe, the head
Master Paku.
Yeah, Paku. Like
Paku.
Either just pick some old people to
Oh my
act old and be old, or pick some younger people and just have them look a little bit younger, because the makeup to age up in the beards, it was looking so weird. My biggest qualm, and it's not actually a big one, but and to that point as well, actually, Erica, to me, it was so funny that they took probably the biggest, outside of Daniel Day Kim, probably the biggest star in this show in Amber Midthunder, and playing Princess Yue, and just threw her in the worst wig I have ever seen. Like,
thank you for saying that, because I was like, am I hallucinating, or is this the worst wig I've ever seen? Like, what is going on? I don't know. I was like, that looks like Princess Yue woke up and chose to put on a wig. Like, that's the only way I can like watch this right now, is like accepting that as the reality. That was tough.
well,
There's a little bit of an explanation behind that, at least in terms of the costume designing.
Please explain it.
So there's two different ways to kind of make a wig. There's like a synthetic wig, which I hate to bring up the movie, but Yue in the movie had a synthetic wig. Looked a little more natural, right? This is the type of wig creation that if you're going to a theme park, that you can have multiple actors, multiple people kind of put on. It's that creation of it. So that's why it like hairlines and stuff just
it looked like a cosplay.
Great.
It looked like a cosplay.
And with all due respect too, like, yeah, Yue's hair is very challenging to like create into like a real person having this hairdo, but it just looked glued on. It looked glued together. It looked like a cast that was just kind of like, and quit like hairsprayed so tight that there's not a strand of real hair on that thing.
Exactly.
There's a lot of wind at the poles. That wasn't there. It wasn't moving.
Yeah.
It was like frozen, right? Her hair was like a little, she like walked out with it a little damp after watching it, and froze to her head. But again, it's like I don't fault like the hair and makeup designers, because I feel like if they had been given more freedom to work and to like really create their own design on some of these like visual aesthetic aspects, then they probably would have come up with something incredible that like still served the spirit of the story but was a little different. And so we weren't like constantly comparing it in our heads.
Yeah, very, very good point. I think that makes a lot of sense. This isn't a big qualm, but it is one that Damon, you wrote about in your changes article.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on it because this to me is one of those things that the reason why it makes me mad is it was so close to being amazing, but it wasn't. And that is, and I'll skip my portion of it when we get to this later, but that was part of the characterization of Zuko. Because Dallas James Liu was fucking perfect.
It was great.
Just amazing. So amazing. Like, that was Zuko. There's even times where he's like getting extra pissed off and angsty where Dante Bosco came out. Like, you could hear the voice trailing off.
I thought the same thing. I thought exactly the same thing.
He was phenomenal. And the part you wrote about Damon was that, like, this dude, there are clips. They Dante Bosco and Dallas Liu actually got together and made like a video about this of all the times from the animated series. He goes, honor, 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 my honor. And he didn't say the word one single time throughout the entire series. He didn't say it once. And, you know, to me, the Agni Kai thing didn't bother me as much as it bothered a lot of people, with the fact that like Zuko actually fought back as opposed to just not fighting back whatsoever. That didn't bother me as much because I thought it portrayed similar vibes and it hammered home the new kind of story they were trying to tell from Ozai's perspective of compassion equals weakness. And so I thought it fit a little bit, but I understand the qualms. To me, it was just that like Zuko was so close to being Zuko perfectly, and they chose the perfect actor. And there was just a few things, whether it be the honor aspect of it or the Agni Kai, what have you, that just felt like they didn't give him enough. Like, he was ready to take the reins and be Zuko for us, and it felt like they had kid gloves on him a little bit. It felt like they had his hands tied behind his back a little bit. And so I can't wait for the Zuko redemption in the future, for more. I loved the expansion on his and Iroh's relationship a little bit. But I do feel like they could have handled the writing aspect better from the specific lines, you know, get that man saying honor at least one time an episode. And then just giving him a little bit more space to cut, kind of like you were talking about with the costume designers, little bit more space for that freedom. But all the changes weren't bad. I thought a lot of the changes were fun and good. I liked how it introducing us and showing us Sozin at the beginning and seeing actually him wipe out the airbenders, as much as that gave it the darker tone. I thought that was actually a welcome addition in terms of, you know, just showing us how the war started, because I don't think they did a great enough job throughout kind of explaining why this war was happening, especially when you throw it at Iroh's perspective so much, where it was like, yeah, you know, who knows why we're even fighting anymore? It was 100 years ago. I feel like that added context at the beginning was good, because we didn't get as much of it throughout as you do during the animated show. So that was a welcome change for me. Damon, what were some of the switches that you thought were like benefited the adaptation?
I mean, what's the one thing I tell you to read every week? And that's the novel. It's just the novels in general, and that starts with Kiyoshi's novel. I said on our primer episode, the one thing that would make me over the moon spirit with anything is if they brought elements from those novels and introduced them into the show now that they have that, right? Because obviously when they made this show back in 2005, like they didn't have any of this stuff available. They didn't know Kiyoshi's backstory. They didn't know anything what Avatar Kuruk did or any of that, right? So we were able to see just a little snippet of lore created from those novels. Like, you know, Kiyoshi being an orphan, and just a little bit they snuck in there. Kuruk, they made a big factor into this, and I dug that because Kuruk's story is fascinating in the novels, and it's only one chapter, and they dug into that chapter to be like, this man died young because he killed spirits. That affected him into his soul, and that's the reason why he couldn't go full Avatar state in the Northern Temple. Small things like that, just I love that. I was like, more of that, please. Going forward, I just need more of. You have access now to dig deeper into the Avatar lore that you have written into your novels, you've written to your comics, you've created going forward with the Korra show as well. It's you have access to that now. Take advantage of it. And they did, for the most part. A little bit, but they did. Except for Roku. Who they made a stand-up comedian. Now, I don't know. Are we going to go into predictions later on? Or things we want to see in a season 2 later?
Yeah, we'll say that towards the end. Feel free
I want to save that one for later.
You can tease. give me that. Go elaborate on that, because that was another one of your great articles about how Roku is the worst Avatar.
He is the worst Avatar that we know of. He is the worst Avatar we know of. There is an Avatar in Yang Chen's book that literally Yang Chen's kind of whole thing is she can sometimes take on a personality of a former Avatar, and you see snippets of one that's just humans suck, kill all humans. You're okay, that one's a problem. We never knew the name, so Roku, congratulations, you're still number 1 on that list. There's something in season 2 with Roku and Aang I really want to see, and they really set it up here with those 2 meeting. All right, let's leave it at that until we talk about it later.
I'm excited. Ryan, how about you? What were some of your favorite additions and changes to the show?
I mean, I think the best change for me was having the 41st Division be Zuko's team throughout his journey to find the Avatar. I think that revelation honestly kind of full circled Zuko's destiny, since that's the word he uses in the show. Just having that kind of thing where he's trying to protect the soldiers. He believes that what the Fire Nation is doing is right, but at the cost of these lives, he's he doesn't stand for it, and that's that leads to the Agni Kai and everything. But I think the addition of Lieutenant G, because he, from what I believe, he wasn't in the original series, so having that character, having that dynamic with Zuko and the crew, I think having someone kind of be the face of that kind of makes the journey a little bit better for Zuko, where he does care for them, even though he doesn't act like it. There's a part of him that actually does care for them. I know in the series there's this whole rescue thing where he saves the crew, but I think here where it's kind of subtle, where he does his blue spirit stuff, he comes back and they're our captain has arrived, or our prince has arrived. And that moment just really brought me to tears a little bit, just because Zuko, although he doesn't talk about honor, that there is honor in what he stands for and what kind of Fire Lord he wants to be, because that is ultimately still his goal. He still wants to be the Fire Lord, but it's the kind of Fire Lord that we're building up to, that's. And I think in the original series we don't really get to see that as much, in terms of we think he's just trying to follow in his father's footsteps, but there's sprinkles of it here where it's he's trying to be better than what his father is or was as the Fire Lord. So I think getting to see that, and especially if we get a specific episode in season 2 about Zuko, I think that I'm really excited to see a lot of more with Zuko and that development, and tying that as well when we get to see Lieutenant's funeral with I remember watching through it, and I was okay, this is obviously a new scene, and the moment with Zuko and Iroh during that scene is really powerful. And then you have the score of Leaves on the Vine in the back, and it's just Jerks. You just 1-2 stab and just twist the knife, and yeah, I'm on the floor crying. So what a great moment. And I still hope we get that song in season 2, just because it's what that means in the actual context of the show and behind the scenes as well. I think I'm excited to see that. But again, all the stuff with Zuko and Iroh, even though Paul Sun Hung Lee is not a 1-to-1 adaptation of Iroh, I think he's really good at just as the character, and like without having to compare it, like I think he plays his part really well, especially with the Earthbender, where they have that talk about like the cost of war and what that has done to people, and we get to see like Iroh regrets a lot of the decisions he's made, but it's a time of war. Like you kind of do what you have to do, and seeing Iroh kind of have that regret and getting to see that more instead of like he does have his like jokiness. He still is more fascinated with tea, eating the different foods at the places they're going to, but he's still masking that.
Your dad's kind of cute.
Yeah, exactly. See, if June met Zuko's real dad, that's she far zaddy. But like, yeah, just I'm liking a lot of the changes they did with the Fire Nation, especially establishing Azula and Ozai earlier, just because like we didn't really know what Azula was doing in season 1, and now we get to this is kind of the canon that they're building. It's like her helping Zhao with all of his stuff, and honestly, that makes sense to me. Like Zhao was kind of like a guy who's failing upwards to me, so seeing that like Azula was kind of stringing him along the whole time, I'm like, that makes sense for Zhao, especially this version of Zhao, because I didn't find him as threatening in comparison to the original show, but I think what he was doing, and like I could see like, this is a guy who will do what he can to ascend through the ranks. And so I really like that we got to have a fuller cast with the Fire Nation this time around.
The one thing I think with Zhao that I thought was interesting is I agree with you. He wasn't like as intimidating and as menacing, but I thought the acting was so incredible because Zhao thought he was. You know what I mean? Like you could tell Zhao thought he was intimidating and menacing, and so I thought that was such a great performance. And the more I think about it, the more I think you really knocked it out of the park, Erica, when you said that they just like weren't given enough reign to experiment with the certain things and like take risks and make changes. Because I've seen so much on Twitter where people say like, did they even watch the show? Do they know anything about the show? Because they just seem to not get it. They just don't get it. And I think, Ryan, what you said, the part about Luten, and because to me that as well was one of my favorite additions, and getting that moment between Iroh and Zuko with the score behind it, that shit says they get it. That shit said right there, that shows they get it. And there was a few of these things that it just kind of seems like we don't want to take a risk. We don't want to be too risky. We want to make sure that people like it enough. We want to make sure that it's just like it gets enough beats, and they got some right, they got some wrong. But I think overall, like a pretty good first season considering all the stakes that went along with getting this right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the characterizations, because let's actually just stick with Zuko and Iroh for now, because we've touched so much on them already. Then we'll go in reverse here on my rundown. Maybe we'll end with Aang. But Zuko and Iroh, what did you think about Damon, Dallas James Liu, and Paul Sun Hung Young's performance, and just their characters in general, the changes?
I want to go last on this one, so I want Erica to go first.
All right.
I thought that Dallas and Paul were the absolute highlight of this show. They were so good. Their chemistry together was so good. They understood their characters so much. Again, I think everybody understood deeply, like you just said. I think that Albert Kim developed this with an extreme understanding of the material and with so much love that it was almost like too much love, because there wasn't enough room and lack of fear to maybe change anything. And how do you adapt something that's perfect? Blah blah blah. But like Dallas and Paul, literally, like I too cried. The first time I cried watching season 1 was when Zuko walks down the line of his infantry that he rescued, and they bow to him one at a time. That just shook me to tears. Everything about that moment, from the way it was shot to Dallas's performance as he's walking down. I also have to say, like, I thought I was going to be really uncomfortable with the bending, because people had really, like, in my life had been like, Erica, like, the bending is bad, like, it looks bad, I can't stand it. I actually I didn't mind it at all. I quite liked it. I thought it looked great. I thought I was going to be super picky about the movement. Like I practiced martial arts. Like Avatar is what got me into martial arts as a kid. So like I thought I was going to be picky about it, but I loved it. And I thought Dallas in particular just happened to eat the bending. He whipped out that like flipping, turning, full body barrel kick so many times, and particularly like the way he used his movement to demonstrate how angry Zuko is constantly, and like the explosiveness that we see in season 1 of the animated show, where like he cannot control himself, he cannot control his emotions. He was so believably like a teenage boy to me. When he would throw his tantrums, I was like, yeah, that's a real boy who is struggling with how to regulate his emotions and figure out what kind of person he's going to be. Because we get very little hints at Zuko's mom in this season as well, a little bit from Ozai, but like that also is so important with the way that his mom raised him versus like the man that his father wants him to be. I'm like, now I'm getting like, I'm like rambling now, but I thought they were both really, really great. And my favorite part of the show, and also like not like, I didn't necessarily think about this a lot as I was a little kid watching it, but watching this again at like my ripe old age, I was like, wow, like the plot between Zuko and Iroh and that relationship is something we so rarely get to see between like an older male role model father type figure and a teenage boy, like really bonding and having an emotional connection. And when they finally hugged at the end, I lost my mind, because you see Iroh throughout the season like want to like comfort Zuko and like want to like sort of like say I love you or like give him a hug, but he doesn't do that. Of course not. He's an Asian uncle. He would never do that. But then finally they get to the end point where they like actually hug, and I'm like, yes, like break down that barrier. It was beautiful.
I think you broke Ryan on that one. But
Yeah, that was too real.
Oh my god, when they finally hugged, I was like, this is a massive deal for like
oh yeah,
television history.
especially when you consider kind of like what's so beautiful about the Zuko and Iroh relationship is it's the polar opposite trope that we're used to, right? Obviously not all the quote unquote male role models in TV and film are as big of assholes as Ozai, but that's the more typical relationship is I need to push you to be better. I need to push you to be better. Don't make the mistakes that I made. I want you to be better than me. And that's why I'm pushing you so hard. And that's why I'm so emotionally stunted, is because I had a tough childhood. And now I'm imposing that on you because that's what all baby boomers do. That's like kind of the relationship you're used to. And then all of a sudden, the kid cracks. But what Iroh is, it's like Ryan talked about. He's made these mistakes. He's regretful about some of these mistakes, but he's dealt with them. He's dealt with his trauma. He's not, while he maybe, if could go back in time, would change some things, he's not sitting there regretting it every day and thinking, and just wasting his life away. He has moved on. He has made peace with his trauma, and he's just there to support Zuko with whatever he needs. He's the parental figure. So many people with super strict, super hard on them parents have kind of always needed just someone who says, you're good enough. You're enough. And that's what two of them have.
And the fact that Iroh was only able to be there for Zuko because Zuko was there for him first, that to me was like the most valuable addition, was us seeing Zuko reach out to Iroh at the funeral, because it makes you root for Zuko like so much to know that like at his purest, like youngest form, like he was a person who could not stand to see his uncle like go through something alone.
What did you, Ryan, think about the two of their relationship and the changes to, like, we don't see Ozai in the first season of the animated show, and now he is as much of a supporting character as anybody, really. Like, he gets almost as much screen time as the Sokkas and the Kataras do in this one. So what were your thoughts on the addition of Daniel Day-Kim in a major way, Ozai in a major way, and then of course how they handled Zuko and Iroh? You touched on that one a while before, so I want to set you up with something else too.
Yeah, no, that was definitely like something when they did cast Ozai. I was like, okay, so we're just gonna have him here then. So I was I did like the build up in the original series of like, for 2 whole seasons you don't see this guy, and then season 3, like, okay, he's the thread, like this is what we've been building up to. Here, I touched upon it a bit as well. Like, I think it adds to Azula's arc as well, because we get to see, I know during the press stuff, like Daniel Day-Kim was saying like how Ozai is kind of puppeteering both of his kids against one another, And it's funny to see that dynamic already when they're apart, because like he's toying with both of them. Like Zuko, ever since the Agni Kai, like he's like trying to fight for his dad's approval again. Like even though there's possibly no way he's gonna find the Avatar, like he thinks like if I do this, like my dad will love me again or tolerate me again, I guess.
And you know what? I've seen a lot of people, especially with how this relationship was portrayed, call bullshit on that plot point. Like, Zuko wouldn't believe that it was doable, and he wouldn't believe that he's redeemed. His dad just gave him this stupid, impossible task. Have you ever dealt with a teenager or a young, like a preteen?
He's a child.
Exactly. Like you tell, like especially if it's a figure that they care about, that it's like you tell them like you have to be a professional athlete, otherwise I'm not going to care about you. That kid is going to take that to heart. And so like that to me is still an incredibly believable plot line.
Yeah, no, I wasn't like trying to be like, oh no, he would not. But like, yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like where he trusts his father so much, even though like for other people, like this is such an impossible task, like he still will do it because like that's what he needs to do to get his father's approval again. And so, yeah, so tying into like having Daniel Day Kim here as Ozai, like I think getting to see like the inner machinations of the Fire Nation a little bit early on is really interesting, just because, you know, we see there's revolutions already happening this early on in the series where like people are trying to throw down Ozai, but you know he's a step ahead with Azula, and so I think having that kind of established right away, it doesn't make it like jarring later on down the road, where because what they're trying to do is get new fans into this instead of like kind of only following like a one-to-one thing. I think having Fire Lord Ozai throughout, it's like having Darth Vader only for the end of the trilogy. It's like, no, this is the threat. You need to know like he is a threat throughout this entire series. You need to show like that is who Aang is up against, and we don't really get to see him do much in terms of, you know, he has this Agni Kai, but like he's not trying at all with Zuko. Like he's kind of just toying with him a little bit just to feel like Zuko has a chance, but he doesn't. So we still haven't seen him like in full power yet, and I think that's something that they can save just so that when Aang eventually has to go up against him, like that's the moment like, oh shit, he's fucking strong, and like we never got to see that. So I think having that, and then again with Azula, where we get to see like she, as much as she thinks she has her father's approval, she doesn't, and that's why like Ozai throws these little jabs at her like, oh, you know, it's actually Zuko who found the Avatar, and like and that already puts her on a direction of like, okay, well, I'm gonna keep training, I'm gonna keep fighting, and like when she does her iconic like lightning pose, like it's like, oh shit, like she means business. We never saw this before in the series, so like seeing that moment's like, and the look of a bit of approval from Ozai, it's like, okay, like, and then it makes sense that like he would send Azula to find Zuko. But sorry, I'm kind of like all over the place because I'm like comparing it to the show and what they actually do, because I do like that Azula is the one that takes over Amashu at the end of this series, where it's like, oh shit, like, you know, what they were saying where the Siege of the North was just a distraction to what their actual plan was to take Amashu and build towards taking Ba Sing Se. And I think showing that now, because that was something that happened in season 2 of the original series, I think showing that now, it's like, okay, this is what we're setting up already. Like this is the tease, instead of like, because we don't really get to have Sozin's comment be a thing until the very, very end. So this is like, okay, you need to keep watching because you need to see what's going to happen to Amashu.
That was the writers' way of saying, Netflix, you better give us our damn season 2.
Yeah, exactly.
But soon.
Yeah.
Very soon. Yeah.
Just soon. When's it coming? Soon.
Before I throw this back to Damon for his thoughts on the Fire Nation, I do want to actually ask Erica you one more question, and that's what were your thoughts on the additions of Ozai and Azula throughout season 1, because obviously they weren't prominently featured before, and I've seen a lot of complaints, you know, from whether it being Zuko fought back in his Agni Kai, or why isn't Azula's fire blue, to not liking Ozai's characterization because like he's supposed to only be hard on Zuko. Azula is supposed to be the kind of golden child. He's not supposed to manipulate her and abuse her the same way he does Zuko, and it's very similar in this show. I like to view it as like Ryan said, he's playing them off of each other. He's trying to see who's best. He's trying to see who is the golden child. And that's kind of how I took it. What did you think of their additions?
Love Daniel Day Kim. Love Elizabeth Yu. Like, I grew up in Honolulu during like the time that Lost and Hawaii Five-0 was filming and on air. So like Daniel Day Kim was just like always around. I think his kids went to my school maybe. But I've like met him. Like he's just like a nice like dude who I consider to be like a local uncle from where I grew up. So it was really cool to see him like really drop in for some acting for this role. And also I've been following Elizabeth for a while because she's like a Wasian actress and I follow all the young Wasian actors. Represent. But I thought it was great. Like I literally thought that Elizabeth was such a strong Azula, and I think that's a very hard character to pull off because being like essentially like having to be one note when you are just like playing someone who is so laser focused on one thing and you're like 90% of your character is just rage. It is very hard to empathize with a character like that and find that to be like interesting to watch and not just like kind of flat. And like also for that kind of like boss ass, can I swear? Like bitchery. That boss ass bitchery is very hard to pull off. I think it's very easy to see through when an actor doesn't have that much confidence. And I thought that she pulled off the anger really well in a part that like obviously like I care so much about Azula as a character, and I thought that she did that part really well. And I thought that the only thing that like I had to kind of readjust to with the Ozai portrayal was I'm so used to seeing him sit in that throne and like just be a silhouette, and like the power and the intimidation in that silence and that lack of understanding of his character makes him such a formidable villain. That I was like oh, am I not going to be scared enough of him by the end of this season because he is too much like a real person with like clear desires and motivations. But I think ultimately like it makes sense including him, and like I mean, watching the firebenders burn multiple people alive was scary enough for me. Like I was like, okay, like I am intimidated, and they have a lot of force and a lot of power, and certainly Daniel Day Kim will be hard to defeat because he was just dodging attacks. Like as Zuko was fighting him, the Agni Kai, I was like, oh god, yeah, he was still intimidating, even though we got to know him a little more, which is a tricky balance.
I think you brought up such a great point too with the Azula characterization, where not only are all those things that you said so hard to do, but especially as a kid, like, so for her to take on that role and just be crushing it, it's incredible. Because you know, like I could picture Stephanie Sue just doing an amazing job of an adult Azula. You know what I mean? But
it's very similar vibe.
You need a kid to do it, and that's what makes it so difficult. And I thought she did an incredible job. Damon, what were your thoughts on Zuko, Iroh, Ozai, Azula? It's your monologue time, and I want you to include someone who you thought was probably the worst miscast of the show, also included in the Fire Nation.
I was so excited for Paul Sung. I was so excited. And then I think I realized, it took me a while. So when I first watched it, I was like, this just doesn't feel like Iroh. I don't know what it is. It took me a while, but I realized it. It's so challenging when you hear a voice for so long. And then even when that main actor who was Mako passed away, when Greg Baldwin came in, mimicked the voice. And Paul did not mimic a voice. He created his own Iroh, right? And everyone really did create their own character. But Iroh is one that it's like when you think of Irohisms, when you think of who he is as a character, he has distinct.
You hear them in
voice.
that voice.
Yeah, he has a distinct voice to him. So every time he talked, I'm like, this character is great. It just never felt like Iroh. He looked like Iroh. The words he was saying was Iroh. It was just, that was it. And I don't want to say it's a miscast at all, because I
was
think
talking about a different one for what it's worth. I wasn't trying to say you thought that was the biggest miscast ever. There was another person, smaller role, that you said was like, this was terrible.
Oh, I've also gotten around on that just because I've only had 2 sequences with May. That was it. We only had 2 sequences with May, and it's very challenging also to only pull off a straight monotone type of like just delivering lines in a straight monotone. Like that is a very challenging role to like kind of take on. But the one thing I will kind of go back on, because I really wanted to talk about this. Erica talked about it great. Ryan talked about it great. But the whole thing with Azula, I thought was so well done for a role in a story we got nothing of in season 1. You go back into the comics, you go back into some other lore that they have, we really do not know what was going on with Azula prior to book 2, honestly. And I think that the way they did it was so cool. I know there were people who are like, oh, where's the blue fire? You get it. Okay, it's there. For 0.3 seconds, you see it. All right. They didn't forget about it, but they show that there's a reason behind it. There's always like a little bit of like a history into why they're kind of explaining things a little bit, and whether people like explanations or not. I do appreciate that you see her get her blue fire when she starts to lose it.
Yeah.
And it's because Ozai is just manipulating the crap out of his kids, which is extraordinarily in character, always has been in character, whether it's like off screen or directly on screen. Even when Azula in season 3 gets what she wants, Ozai's still talking her down because he knows that like I only care about me, and he's just kind of screwing with his kids constantly.
Well,
So
with
you see
Azula,
that here.
with Azula, it's almost a little bit of like a Darth Plagueis, Darth Sidious situation where he's got to be careful that if he builds her up too much, she's just going to be like, fuck you, I'm done. I'm Fire Lord now.
So, like, I mean, the whole thing with her is he will toy with her and just use her as a weapon. The way he smirked when he finally got like the lightning bending out of her was like, he's like, I pushed her far enough here. I can go harder next time. And that's when you can start to see the downfall. We're already seeing the buildup and the downfall of that character, where she just gets pushed so hard that eventually she snaps. And we're seeing a bit of it. And I'm like, oh, that's such a cool thing to go into.
I like it. I like it a lot as well. And I think you brought up a great point with the Iroh and the voice thing. The reason I want to just kind of like champion Paul's portrayal once again is because I don't think anybody could have gotten it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody.
Only literally if you gotten Greg Baldwin to do it himself and just talk.
Yeah.
That is the only way that like you could have made me be like, oh yeah, there he is.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
rest of
And
it,
so
yeah.
it's like I like that he did make it his own on that one, because I don't think anybody else would have been able to do the 1-for-1 on him there. But let's switch from the Fire Nation to the Water Tribe, because we've gone an hour, and Ryan, I know you got a hard out at 5:30 Eastern time here as we record, which is in 30 minutes. So just in case we get a little bit too excited and keep going, I'm going to keep throwing it to you first, Ryan, now. From here on out, just so we can make sure to get your thoughts in. But feel free to kind of mesh them together. What did you think of Sokka? What did you think about Katara? And just the whole portrayal of the Water Nation?
I'll start with Katara, just because like Katara was a little bit harder for me to get as a character in this adaptation, where like the performance is, the actress is still very young, so I understand like it's not going to be as easy for her to kind of get that portrayal, that Katara journey out of her. But like it took me until they got to the Northern Water Tribe where I'm like, okay, I can see aspects of Katara in her. And it's still a little late in the game, but I still enjoyed that time with her. I think whether it's like giving her better dialogue or getting to flesh out her character more. I think that's some of the stuff like that I need to see in season 2, just because like I'm still not completely sold on her just yet. And on the other hand, Ian Owsley as Sokka, immediately from the first episode, I was like, this is Sokka to a T. Like the jokes that he was making, the deadpan humor, like it's just like, and I'm not really that big of a Sokka character. Like I don't hate Sokka as a character, but like in the show, I was like, yeah, he's fun, but like I didn't like love him. But here, Ian Owsley's portrayal, I'm like, you know what, this is great. This is fun, and like I'm, you know, I like that even though they took out what his journey was in the original series, I think having him be so strong on being like, I need to be the best fighter because I'm not a bender. I have the responsibility to watch over my sister. I have to be the best big brother to her and try to protect my village. I think that journey for him works in lieu of what they took out, just because like, you know, there's this when we see him with Suki, it's not too much of like, oh, it's a girl that beat me. It's more just like there's just stronger people and I need to be stronger. I need to be able to defend my sister, to defend my people. Like I think it's just like he's willing to do a lot and learn a lot more, especially when we get to Amashu and he's like, and Sai brings up that point of like, you could be a good weapon specialist. You could like, you're good at tactician, you're good at strategy. And we know that that's what Sokka eventually becomes, like that kind of strategic person. So I think I like that we're again building up his character arc that way. We're going to see his growth, and I'm excited to see more of that throughout the series.
I thought they did such a good job with Sokka's character for how that as much shit that caused with the press tour, but leading up with everybody being like, what do you mean you're taking out Sokka's sexism? Where will the growth be? You know what? They made it more relevant and realistic to today's society, where you're not going to have as many people being like, you can't do this, you're a girl. It's all internalized misogyny. And that's still there with this character. It's still the internalized misogyny, and he still grows with it. And I think that is really great as well. Damon, what did you think about Sokka and Katara?
Sokka was easily one of my standouts from this show. Ian Owsley was phenomenal. Straight off the animated page, like just perfect. To me, like most of his jokes land. The tone that he was kind of like going off of that deadpan humor was just perfect. I think the biggest issue with Katara is a lot of that anger, a lot of that fire within her was really taken away in the writing of this character. And I think a little bit had to do with it, like, yeah, because you took out that misogyny factor with Sokka, you don't see that straight up front. So that's challenging. I think going forward, there's a couple moments, especially in Omashu, when you see the two of them go back and forth at each other, and you see Katara really start to feel like Katara, like have a little bit of that snapback back at Sokka, and her anger came from stop treating me like a child. I'm not a child anymore, right? I never, even in the original show, when it came down to Katara's like needing to be a mom to Sokka, personally, like that never made sense. Like, Gran, what the hell are you doing to make like this girl try to like have to be a mother figure? Like, what's going on there in this family that Gran ain't doing anything more? Anyway, with Katara, I think there's a lot of still potential there. And I think the key word with the show in general is there's still just a lot of potential with all the actors going forward, with the writing going forward, that will just get better if we see them again in season 2.
How about you, Eric? What did you think about Katara? What did you think about Sokka? I want to save me for last on this one because Katara is my favorite character in all of the lore.
I think you're the only person I've ever met who has Katara as their favorite character.
She's my number one. I love her so much. I would die for
Wait,
Katara.
good for you. Good for you. Drinking your respect women juice for sure over there. I agree that I was fascinated by the internet hubbub surrounding the elimination of Sokka's sexism. And I was so pleased with his arc. I thought it was very fully realized that like he still has a journey with his masculinity. It just doesn't have to do with also hating women. And I think that like you can have like a young boy being like, what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be a man? That doesn't have to do with like it's never even a question whether or not he's going to respect women, and that's great. But he can still think a lot about his role in his society, and I thought that was beautiful. I like shout out. We haven't talked about episode 2 very much, but it was my favorite episode, and I thought that the Kyoshi Island was like stunning, and his sequence with Suki, chef's kiss. Maria, loved you as Suki, like so good. Everything about that was awesome.
That's
and
like
then
the
I think
number
it's
one
funny.
search on this series, hey, is like Maria as Suki. That's like Google Trends is like everybody's
Really?
trying to figure out who the hell is Suki
Oh my
because we
God,
all
okay.
love her.
I did an interview with her like 2 years ago, when she first finished shooting, because she like graduated same year as me from like a different acting program, and I like reached out to her and I was like, do you want to talk about this? And we could barely talk about anything because it was like so under lock and key at that point. Like we couldn't barely talk about the show. But there, maybe I'll send you the link to like the interview we did like forever ago, where you can learn a little bit about her life and her upbringing, because it's really cool. She like very international upbringing in different places around the world. But she was great. And then I thought it was funny, the Katara stuff, like that like she has so little to do in season 1 in the animated series, and it felt like so much of that was taken away with her struggle to like want to go to the Northern Water Tribe. So it was hard because it felt like she didn't have an objective. Like she had the water scroll, she was doing her best to learn, she was like along for the ride, and then she had her moment with Paku, which I loved. I thought that fight was great. It was very satisfying. The second time I cried watching the show was when she was like, we're here to fight, and it panned to all the female waterbenders.
I cried there too.
I cried. I was having a flashback to the Avengers Endgame sequence where all the women show up, and my sister always makes fun of me for that. She's like, you're so simple, like you just want to see all the women together. I'm like, I do. Like, turns out it works so well for me. I literally immediately cried when all the women were standing together. I'm a simple person. Show me group girl bossery, and that was great. But yeah, it was weird. Like I think that she had a hard job as a character to do anything because she wasn't given so much to do. But she doesn't have that much to do in season 1 anyway. So I was like, her character develops more and more as time goes on. So yeah, potential for sure.
Yeah, I thought when we got Katara, she was wonderful. I was happy. I messaged Damon as I was going through these movies, as I was going through the episodes. I think it was in episode 7, and I was like, "There's my Katara!" And so it was like you said, she doesn't have much to do in the show, and then in this, I actually feel like she was almost sidelined even more. We just didn't get very much Katara, and then when we did it at the beginning, it was kind of like, yeah, she's just there. But then episode 7 and 8 was when I thought we really got to see Katara be Katara. I hope that continues as she has bigger roles throughout these next 2 seasons. But I thought she did a very, very great job there. Let's talk about Aang, because this is Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's him. That's Aang. We barely talked about Aang, and we've gone through over an hour here. Ryan, what did you think about Gordon Cormier as Aang and just the character in general? Because we get the difference right off the bat. I feel like Damon always rolls his eyes at me when I say this, but I thought they could have started with hey, do you want to go penguin signing? Just show us that that's still Aang right off the bat. What did you think?
I'm a little on the fence with him. I think because on the press tour, Gordon Cormier is having fun, and like he seems like Aang, like 100% on the press tour. In the show, there's moments where it's there, and like I get it's a lot of telling, not showing with Aang, where like in his first scene with Gyatso, he's like, oh, I just like to have fun and I like to goof off. Like he kind of says something like that, and I'm like, okay, yes, we know that as fans, like we know that's who you are. You don't need to tell us that. Like show us like that fun, goofy side. Like, and there's bits of it with like when him and Katara like where he kind of messes with Katara when she's like trying to water bend and everything. And I get like there's an urgency there. Aang has woken up from the iceberg after 100 years, and he's like, I gotta right this wrong now. Like there was a war going on that he believes is his fault, And like, so I get that like we can get a lot of fun Aang right away because like he has a lot to kind of clean up a little bit. And so while the Avatar aspect of him is there, I think he's able to portray like the actual age of Aang well, like being this kid with so much responsibility on his shoulders. I think he does that well, but it's just the kind of fun, goofy side that isn't there. But I don't hate it though, because I think it works for what the show is trying to set up with Aang and his journey.
Another case of I thought the actor was pretty damn perfect, and maybe they just could have used a little bit more room to cook in their roles. Damon, what did you think about Aang's journey throughout the show and then the performance as well?
I thought his performance was decent. It's very challenging with young actors in general, right? Like, Gordon's a literal child when he's doing this. And I think with that in mind, he did pretty good. I do completely agree with Ryan when he was like, yeah, they're doing way too much telling and not showing. That is a lot of this show in general. And, you know, if you want to play a fun drinking game, take a shot every time they say save the world. You'll be gone pretty quickly. They say it a lot. And when it just comes to like, there's quite a few moments there where you're just like, you're seeing a lot of like, yep, that's a very Aang moment. And when you see him on this press tour now with his voice has dropped like 3 decibels, like that's going to be a fun season too. You see him on his press tour and he's just so fun. Him in Dallas going back and forth so quick. You can tell that those 4 have become so close. Not just like during the show, but outside the show as well. I'm so excited for that going forward because you can tell like the dynamic is just grown and grown and grown. They really grew into all of them. They grew into their roles as the season went on. And yeah, like I do wish he just kind of came out of the iceberg and said, "Hey, you want to go penguin sledding?" Just that once. We didn't have to see the penguins, the penguin otters, I think they are. But I think overall he was good. He was pretty good.
What did you think, Erica? And I think this is a interesting comparison too, because it's so similar to Percy Jackson with what Damon just said there. Like Walker during the show, you know, he looks very much Percy's age. By the time he's doing these press tours, when we're doing these interviews, dude's my height. His voice cracks. Like that's not a 12-year-old anymore. So not only do they got to get their butts in gear with these future seasons. Speaking of Percy Jackson, Rick obviously just posted on Threads the other day that the script is in the midst of being written right now. So what did you think about Aang's performance and Aang's role in the show, how his story was told, and then Gordon Cormier's performance as well?
Okay, first of all, my Wi-Fi is struggle busing. So if I cut out, just finish my thought for me, and I will assume that you knew exactly what I wanted to say. It is interesting for Walker and Gordon, like, to go through this very similar experience at a very similar time. Not only like as like young kid actors leading these huge franchises, but also because their characters are super similar, and that like the entire point of Avatar is like Aang has to know who he is to know what kind of leader and person with power he is going to be, and that Gyatso wanted him to learn who he was before he gained all this power, just like Sally Jackson wants Percy to know who he is before he becomes the child of the big 3 and the child of the prophecy. It's literally the same thing. It's a fantasy trope, you know, whatever. I thought that similarly to Percy Jackson, some of the dialogue,
I'm going to finish the thought because it cut out. I'm going to do what you said. Some of the dialogue just felt a little bit awkward, you know, instead of just kids being kids. Some of the dialogue felt a little bit awkward there, but I did think they still did a great job there too. And it's going to get better as they get older, as they get this chemistry wrapped up between the group, as they work more together. They've now been like hanging out for these last 3 years now, when we see them again. This crew is going to be a lot more tight knit than the first time they were filming, and hopefully, I just give the room to ad lib and the room to mess around and the room to just be kids, because I feel like often with like when child stars are acting, like they don't often have as much room to mess around and to try out new things comedically, and to come up with their own lines, because they're kids. They're not quite ready to be doing that stuff yet. They need the writers to do it for them. But at the same time, the writers are all adults and the kids are kids. And if you could kind of give these kids a chance to cook and step in and speak like teenagers speak, I think it'll sound pretty natural sometimes. Erica, did I get it right?
Yeah, I think so. I heard most of that and I was like, okay, nailing it. Yeah, just that I think that dialogue should be run through the little kid speaking machine, where I think it's easier said than done to be the kids should just improvise. There's a lot of pressure and they're trying to juggle a lot of things at once as they're standing on their mark and looking in the right direction and all of that. But in general, I think we can all benefit from just a little bit more colloquial speech for the youngest of our cast. I've never heard a child say the phrase fun loving before. I don't know if that's a phrase that kids use, but I could have done with more casual speak in general, but that's a common, scripting for kids. They don't talk like adults. Yeah.
I felt like touches of that in Percy Jackson too, where it's wait a minute. That's not a 12-year-old saying that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've never heard a 12-year-old say that, but yeah.
Ryan, what do you I want to feel free to kind of parlay this with closing thoughts as well, because I know you do have to get out of here a little bit, but feel free to close with, was the mission accomplished? Did they do a good enough show to get season 2? And was this to you a worthy enough adaptation that you've enjoyed watching it? And then the last kind of set of characters I wanted to talk about was that episode 2, Kyoshi Island, getting Kyoshi and Suki, because they were just, both of them, highlights of the entire series for seemingly everybody.
Yeah. I think I like the change that kind of Kyoshi's taking with that she has a bigger role in this. I did like how they framed the camera in a way that she looks super tall, because she is, in comparison to Aang. I really like that. I love the sequence where she took over and she got to mess with the firebenders a lot. That was really, really cool to see. And I wasn't expecting it that early on in the series, but that set the tone of this is what the Avatar can do. And that's kind of what Aang is trying to build up to, Damon brought this up in his biggest changes thing, where Aang's fear is controlling the Avatar state. And I think seeing what he can do, what the Avatar can do in the Avatar state, that scares Aang a little bit. And so again, it's a lot about building this journey out where that's what he needs to learn to master. As much as we should be seeing him master all 4 elements, he also needs to master controlling the Avatar state so he doesn't affect all the people around him. As for Suki, I mean, Maria Zhang is wow, she is really, really great at Suki. It took a while for the marketing to show off the Kyoshi Warriors in general, but when we saw her, I was okay, that is an accurate costuming, the makeup's there, perfect. And then when we get to see her, it's I wasn't too big of a fan of her already lusting over Sokka from a distance. I liked how that was kind of a thing at the end of that episode. But I love the chemistry though. The chemistry between her and Ian Owsley was really great. It's very palpable. And seeing that when they fight one another, it's flirtatious, but they're still taking it seriously. And so I like that dynamic between them. And I was as soon as that episode ended, I'm this is the last time we're going to see Suki this season. I was God damn it. I wish we get to see more of her. And I know we will. I mean, I hope we will later on in future seasons, because Maria Zhang is killing it as Suki. She just looks really, really great. So I'm excited for her and to see even more of the Kyoshi Warriors and maybe even establish some of them as well.
Yeah, I thought they were pretty awesome. And episode 2 was your favorite, Erica. What did that mean for you to get to see Suki, get to see Kyoshi, and have that fully developed? And is that kind of one of your biggest hopes for future seasons, is give me more?
I love the Kyoshi Warriors. Again, I'm a simple woman. Put a bunch of women together in a group and let them do fight choreo, and that's all I care about. I thought that design of the island was so beautiful. It was like very, obviously like Avatar pulls on a lot of different like cultural references in the original, but like they really clearly made Kyoshi Island like very Japanese, and I thought it was like so stunning. All of the design, all of the performances, I really liked the movement. The choreo with the fans was like so great. Again, that sequence between
The sequence between the Kyoshi war, I lost it. I
I think
don't
it was
know.
gonna be the sequence between Sokka and Suki.
Sequence between Sokka and Suki. I'm gonna let you take over that one, Damon, because that was a comment you had. Suki's one of your favorite characters. This
I do
is
like Suki.
Kyoshi's your favorite Avatar. Suki's one of your favorite characters. What did you think about the subtle changes they made to her character?
So the Suki changes, I was like, ow, man, we're making Suki a little different here right off the beginning. And Erica, you can jump in here at any point because this was coming off of it. But it made sense for the world that they put her in, right? Like, she hasn't left that island. She doesn't know what the outside world is like. Now, all of a sudden, here comes like this group of people, one of them her age, and be like, hey, we have the Avatar with us too. Isn't this great? So just be like, what? Like, it makes sense for her character.
Little bit of Little Mermaid vibes, a little bit of like whole new world. Ooh, who's this man? Like
a little bit. I mean, I got about this earlier, but like the fact that we saw Kyoshi like just straight up in episode 2, we saw her do the sequence. She did the opening monologue in episode 1. They knew who they were like writing this for, and it's for the Kyoshi fans. Like, we won through this entire show. Straight up, what the only thing they could have done more is if like, oh, and by the way, here's Rangi too, and here's like, just the only way they could have like made this more for us is if they just were like, and we're just pretty much doing the novel at this point. But they made her tall, they made her powerful. It was just so good. And maybe I'll go into this a little bit later, but the fact that she's almost taking the mentorship role a little bit away from Roku and having it put on her, I was so in on that. I'm like, look, I'm not sorry, Roku. Give Kyoshi, make her the mentor, so that in that way, when Aang, I'm gonna get into this now, when Aang in season 2 finally freaking finds out that it's Roku's fault that his entire people are gone, we never saw this in the animated show ever. Aang was very forgiving, clearly. They set this up to when they finally get to Roku, and Roku's being like stand-up comedian. Hey, Aang, how's it going? I want Aang to be livid at this man. I want him to tell him off. I want him to say, you failed your job as the Avatar and could have prevented this from happening. And all of this, as much as it's in my fault for running away, it's your fault for making this happen. I need that in season 2.
And on that note, Ryan, give me your season 2 predictions and hopes. And then feel free to bounce out of here because I know that you got to get going as well. Overall thoughts, as a big Avatar The Last Airbender fan, coming off the last live action time, we got a live action attempt. We got a whitewashed pile of crap. How do you think they did, and what are your thoughts for season 2?
I mean, if we're using that as the bar, like, yeah, they fucking went through the fucking roof. Yeah, like, there's no question about it. But no, I think again, like season 1 is the weakest out of the 3 seasons of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I think they did a decent job of trying to. I know it's a lot of exposition, but that kind of is what season 1 is. You're trying to get people acclimated to this world. So, like, I get that, like, that's what they had to do to get in new fans, because it is very lore heavy and a lot of world building that happens. And because we don't get those 20 episodes to establish all that, squeezing into 8 episodes, I think it did what it needed to do in that sense. I'm pretty sure, again, I really hope season 2 gives us longer episodes or more episodes, just so we get that kind of room to breathe a little bit. I'm very excited for Toph when she comes. Like, the cast already has a strong dynamic now. I'm very excited to see when they throw in Toph into that, because she's a lot of chaotic energy, but necessary chaotic energy for the team. And again, that gives someone for Katara to really bounce off of, because their friendship dynamic with one another is really, really fun. And so I'm excited to see Katara like kind of have that clashing a little bit. I'm excited to see a lot more Fire Nation stuff, especially because like now that Ty Lee and Mai will hopefully join along with Azula's journey. I want them to be established a little bit more, because they're kind of just there as like to be used as like Azula's like talking points, like because we won't get to like hear her monologue, obviously. So like this is kind of like a way for her to express her emotions. But I want them to really establish like Ty Lee and Mai as characters instead of just figures for Azula to speak through. So I'm excited for that, and I'm trying to think. I mean, Ba Sing Se, the whole political landscape of Ba Sing Se is really gonna be like where things really get dark, because they already established like how dark this show can be. When we get to Ba Sing Se and a lot of the Dai Li and everything like that, I'm excited to see who they cast. Like even if they just get Clancy Brown to just play the same character, like that would be really great to see, because like he can do that so well in live action. But if not, again, when we get to Ba Sing Se, that's going to be like where the show really picks up and like really it hits home like how dark and how political the show can be.
Couldn't have said it better myself, my friend, and thank you so much for joining us today. You stepped in for Adam. You absolutely crushed it. You can catch Ryan on all the Agents of Fandom socials, and it's at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. He's Ryan_reflects on Twitter. And like I said, the very best social media director in the game. Thank you so much for joining us, my friend. Erica, before we get to your prediction, I also want to know your thoughts on just, because you brought it up earlier, the representation in this show. Because not only do we get to see a lot of badass women together doing some things, but we get to see each of these cultures way more accurately represented than the last time they attempted live action.
I'm going to try and do this so eloquently, because I feel like every time I start talking, I get cut off by my Wi-Fi. Representation matters. The best part about the series, and the one thing that this show really contributed to the fandom, was the experience of seeing Asian, Indigenous, Pacific Islander people in these roles. And honestly, I knew going into this that was going to be what mattered most to me watching the show, and I was right. Like seeing like every new actor pop up for like a one-liner or a guest role or like a little co-star as like an Asian actor I've never seen before, or an Indigenous actor I've never seen before, I was floored. It was just like, I've never seen so many people in one project, let alone like an American/Canadian project. It was beautiful. I think it's like an experience that I know for the cast and crew was like unbelievably valuable. I know this from speaking with Maria, that like it was like a family, like working on set, and like everybody's opinions were valued and heard, and like obviously that in and of itself means that this project was like worth making and worth something. And that's really special to see. I loved it. And I, as much as I want people to see the animation before they see this, because the animation is perfect, it is really cool knowing that younger people will watch this first and have like a very different experience with the material than we did growing up.
Very well said. Now, predictions for season 2. What do you hope for? Like, what are the few of the things that it's like, I need this? And what do you have any theories of things that they could maybe change along the way?
Erica?
Yeah.
Okay. I need the lighting to be warmer. I don't know why. I felt like the lighting was so white so much of the time. I don't know that much about lighting, so like somebody else who knows things could like translate this better, but it felt to me like the lighting was very off at times, and I didn't feel like we were outside when we were outside, or inside when we were inside, and it was almost like a little bit more fluorescent than I wanted it to look. I know that fantasy lighting is like a big thing where you can kind of like pop off and make the world seem more magical depending on how you light it. So yeah, I just want everything to be warmer. And maybe, CGI is what it is. It'll only get better and better. It'll only get better and better.
that was something I noticed. Just like I started last night at the time we record this Shogun on Hulu in the States, Disney Plus in Canada. And one of the tweets I saw about it is Shogun is essentially just if they made a television show with good lighting. Because so rarely do you see that in TV where it's like it's either so dark or it's so bright and it just doesn't work. And Shogun, they really do a great job of it.
Yeah. I know there's something technical about the way that like things are shot on such nice lenses now, and we are mostly watching them on laptops, that like something about it isn't translating from like a technical standpoint. But I think we should collectively as a society like figure that out, because everything is too bright or too dark and I don't know what to do about it.
Couldn't agree more. Damon, give me some of your season 2 predictions and hopes.
Season 2 predictions. Well, I gave my big one that I truly hope happens. One thing I will say about season 2 compared to season 1 from the animated to here, season 2 is extraordinarily more streamlined than season 1 is. For them to merge all those storylines in season 2 into, from 20 episodes to 8, if they do have to stick at 8, will be significantly easier in this one. Here are your key points. We get tough. We go to the library. Appa's gone. We're in Ba Sing Se.
No. I'm so scared for the Appa.
Oh, yeah. We're all gonna get
episode.
ready to see Appa's Lost Days.
Lost Days. What did you think about Wan Shi Tong in the spirit world?
We didn't even talk about the spirit
yeah.
world in this.
Yeah.
They made some like a little changes, obviously. Katara and Sokka join Aang through his spirit world journey. They bring in Ko very, very early. They change his like whole thing a little bit where it's like it's not emotions that may give him his face. He just eats the face. That is a very significant change. But I was kind of like, whatever. Like I like at that point, like, whatever. Like, who cares? The whole spirit world thing was like really, really, really cool. And we did see Wan Shi Tong for a little bit. So that is a good tease coming into season 2. I kind of want to know why Wan Shi Tong was even like in the spirit world at that point, but I was like, he's an owl of knowledge, spirit. He can just do what he wants. He probably, honestly, I was like, oh, maybe this is me always trying to like make things make sense in my head. I was like, oh, maybe he just found out the Avatar just like popped into the spirit world. So he wanted to go there to be like, hi, Avatar, I exist. Goodbye. And there we see him in season.
I always forget like where things happen and when they blend together. I haven't gone through the series quite as many times. And so I'm sitting there watching that and being like, the fuck is this owl doing here already? Like he's supposed to be in a library, not a forest.
Well,
Wan Shi Tong always scared the poo-poo out of me. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good. I was gonna say even Secret Tunnel is season 2. They blend a lot of things in this that were like when people are like, oh, it's so overstuffed. I'm like, well, yeah, because it's like we're having some season 2 things here. There's one thing from season 3 they threw in as well, but you know what? Who cares? We're telling stories.
You start. I was about to go into my predictions, so you go first.
I was gonna say, off of this idea of things being sort of like tossed in from other seasons, I think part of it is like, oh, the benefit of like, hindsight, like we could mix things in and whatever. I also cannot help but think about Shadow and Bone, the most recent Netflix adaptation of a property that means a lot to me, and how difficult and tricky that was. I don't know if any of you have delved into the Grisha verse.
I have. I actually I did the reviews for Agents of Fandom on that one.
Yeah, so I was a big fan of the books, and they pulled so many things from all over the series to kind of like recreate the timing. And this is a completely unfounded personal theory that the problem with like adaptations doing that is that we don't have multi-season orders anymore, and there's like no guarantee that you are going to get to do the entire story that you want to do. And the problem with that is that you have creators being like, well, I want to show you the best parts of this story because it means a lot to me to adapt certain moments. And so they are pulling from like throughout the course of the material that they have, which makes sense because they are working under a time constraint and the idea that Netflix will not renew their show or give them more money. And it is like the material is like, like suffering because of that. And because of Netflix not, being more supportive maybe of multiple seasons and just like the streaming model in general, obviously being unstable.
I have 2 things I want to bring up before I wrap. One, we brought it up earlier. Iroh in season 2 doing Leaves from a Vine. Personally, for me, I don't want him to sing it.
Okay.
I either do it because that song, the way it's done with Mako's voice and what that
Mm.
actually means, I don't think, and even honestly, even Greg Baldwin, who's the voice of Iroh for season 3, has brought this up, and I totally agree with him. I think the way they did it with just the music track in the background is a beautiful nod to it without overwriting that moment, which was
Mhm.
Mako's last time ever in a studio singing that song about himself. That is like, there's something there, and I know people want to hear the song. Maybe just have Mako's original voice over it at some point or have it playing somewhere. But for me, I don't want that moment overwritten. The other one was Oma and Shu
Mm.
in this. Very quick, very, very subtle change, but I loved it. Was they made Oma and Shu 2 women. So a
Yeah.
little LGBTQ representation.
Yeah,
That was a really great change. I like that.
yeah, very
I
subtle.
didn't even
Like,
notice that.
Yeah, they
I
both
was watching on my
change.
phone.
Yeah, they were just like she and she. I was like, oh, she. Oh, okay, I like that.
Yeah, that was a nice little addition there as well. My biggest hope for season 2, it's not really so much a prediction, just what I really want to have them put a lot of care into and do such a good job of is, like I always talk about on this podcast that I love and I think I brought it up actually in our Percy Jackson conversation too, when Percy is finally doing his I'm fighting you now, Ares. The look at these waves behind me. I wanted that to last a little longer because I love the Super Saiyan power-up moment. I love our heroes are getting to the top of their game right now, and they're finally doing it. Here it is. Like this is why they're the best. Now, absolutely no disrespect whatsoever to Mako and Bolin and Asami. But the reason why I love Avatar: The Last Airbender so much, and the reason why I think I like it a bit more than Korra, is the supporting cast. I like Korra better than Aang, but I like the supporting cast of The Last Airbender better. And I think one of the reasons for that is it hits my like little tropey things that I love of like Katara. She by the end, she's the fucking best. She's the best waterbender we've seen. She learns how to bloodbend and bans bloodbending because no one else should be able to do it. It's fucked. We get to see Toph become the greatest earthbender of all time. She metal bends. She creates a new type of bending. It's incredible. That's what I love about this supporting cast is it's not just Aang. Aang has all of these pressures on him, but he'll be the first to tell you, I can't do it by myself. It's my friends. It's my team. It's Team Avatar. And Team Avatar is the fucking tits. They're so strong. But between Toph, between Katara, Sokka doing his thing, of course, but like
It's just Sokka doing his thing.
and then you add Zuko by the end of it. Come on. You add Zuko by the end of it. It's beautiful. And I really can't wait to just see each of these supporting cast members get their moment, get their time to shine.
It's perfectly legal to shit on Mako, I think. I think like no one is gonna fault you for that.
Yeah,
he was tough.
Yeah.
He didn't do much.
To Bolin or Asami, a little bit of disrespect to Mako.
Hey, all the Nuktuk love in the world here. Nuktuk forever.
Go watch Korra if you haven't. Here's my issue with Mako.
Is one of the best animal hybrids in the entire franchise.
Yeah, Paku's fantastic. My issue with Mako is he starts so strong and better than everyone, It's like he's the guy at the beginning. Then he just doesn't get better for the entire series. Bolin learns to lava bend. Asami's got all these different challenges that she makes her way through. Korra becomes fucking awesome. And then Mako's just still sitting there at the end like, I'm still a cop.
Yeah, Legend of Korra is like so inherently like a sapphic adventure in which she like discovers her lesbianism and all the men just kind of disappear. They just fade into nothingness. They are two-dimensional, boring members of her life.
Exactly. That's very well said. Oh, I did love the way that series came to a close. And Give us all the Avatar adaptations. Give me more Korra. Give me live action Korra, animated Korra. Give me live action Kyoshi. Give me a Kyoshi animated show. And there you go. And so make sure you read your novels. Damon's weekly reminder to read your novels. I downloaded Audible and I bought the book. So it's a start. It's a start.
So what are you waiting for?
You know what? I'll tell you actually, because my Ava, my wife, my wonderful, beautiful, amazing 8 months pregnant wife has begun her maternity leave. And so she's home now. And so I don't have as much time to just like listen to stuff like podcasts or books or watch shows. And so I'll find time. You know, when baby gets here and I'm bored in the middle of the night because I'm rocking them to sleep and they're not sleeping, like that's when I'm going to be listening to my Kyoshi novels. Thank you to all of our amazing, wonderful guests from the Agents of Fandom, Ryan and Damon, absolutely crushing it as per usual. Kind of looks like we got a Damon's screen freeze.
I can still talk if you need me.
There it is. There it is. His screen froze, but you can still hear him. Erica's screen's been so good for so long now that Damon's just took the disease.
Don't jinx it.
So on that note, before we get out of here, Erica, tell us where the people can find you on socials and what's the Seaweed Brain Podcast up to? You guys taking a break now or still going strong?
I wish we were taking a break. I'm too worried about the algorithm to ever take like a meaningful break from doing our podcast. But yeah, you can find Seaweed Brain at Seaweed Brain Podcast on Instagram, Seaweed Brain Pod on Twitter. Listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Spotify is a good place because we have like interactive stuff there. You know, you can do the polls, you can do the Q&A. Right now we're just doing this like a bunch of interviews with people who worked on the show, cast and creative, and we're doing our own like special little breakdown. So we're gonna do like a Percabeth overview episode for the adaptation. We're gonna do like a special deep dive into the music. And we also have a Patreon where we are going to probably be covering Avatar in great length. So this was like a really great, this is the first time I've talked about it. So this is all my preliminary, like first thoughts. And then I'll like maybe gather myself and be more specific and even more thorough on our Patreon to come.
Well, you were absolutely wonderful as per usual. Hopefully we won't have to wait until Percy Jackson season 2 to have you back on the podcast. We'll find another reason to do it before then. You can catch Damon every week on the Agents Fandom Comic Corner. Most recent week, him and AF Parker, co-host, broke down the Nightwing run coming to a close, as well as said happy birthday to Wanda Maximoff. Birthday, anniversary, I don't know, something like that. But it's a great show. Quite literally the very best on YouTube that you can find, and now also on the Agents Fandom podcast feed. Not only breaking down comics, but just finding the very best guests in the industry to join the show as well. Tune into the Agents of Fandom on socials, where Ryan and our amazing social team are giving you the latest and greatest news and updates in the entertainment industry at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. And of course, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're watching us on YouTube. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming. The Fandom Academy podcast is talking about Dune, and we have quite a few people who have done some great reviews on that, both video and on the website as well. We got X-Men 97 coming, and boy, do we have some exciting interviews coming for that one. I won't say what yet. It's still a tease. We're not going to release it yet, but we got 4 very exciting interviews planned for X-Men 97, hopefully with some more to come as well. So tune in on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us this week. We will be back next week as well for more of the Agents Fandom Pod. We'll see you later, everyone. Peace.
Bye.